All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Clash of Cultures. This is our college football previews. Today we're going to be talking about Michigan. Obviously, my dad's an Ohio State fan, so this one's probably going to be more of him talking about Michigan and what he dislikes or what he thinks is going to happen with their team this year. But just for me to kind of kick it off, I think when I kind of made some notes about this team and was looking at their depth chart and the way I view them, everybody who has been following the channel and watched all of our college football. Uh, Content from last season knows that week in and week out, I was not a believer in Michigan. I had a feeling at some point they were going to fall. Obviously they fell in the playoffs, but I didn't have them making the playoffs last year. But I think going into this season, Michigan, if I had to bet on any team, I'd probably bet on Michigan, just because of the amount of talent they brought back. I just looking at the depth chart, I'm pretty sure they probably have the most veteran or experienced team in college football. Obviously, JJ McCarthy's very experienced. They have, in my eyes, the best duo in the backfield with Corum and Donovan Edwards. At first I thought Corum was way better than him. Then now I think Donovan Edwards is better than him. So I think they're very good backfield. And you saw Corum went down; they were still good. I think it was flip flop back and forth. Um, 8 of the 11 starters are seniors on offense, so I think that's going to be very helpful for JJ. You got Roman Wilson, and like I said, I already named the two running backs. So I think he's like the ultimate game manager in my eyes. He's not super athletic. He doesn't need to do anything crazy. It's kind of the opposite of what we talk about with Ohio State and Georgia in previous videos. I think he has the experience along with the talent around him. So, there might be a few games where he needs to kind of do Stetson Bennett like performances and win the game for them. But then there's other games where he could just flip it to his back and his back's going to go 85 yards down the sideline. So, my synopsis on this team is that they are very experienced. And I would say they're going to come in. Do you know the betting favorites, like the lines, like
They're 10-5. You remember we looked.
No, I mean like for the whole thing, like the championship.
Oh,
Who's
I
the
don't.
favorite? Okay, I'll have to look at that after.
Yeah.
But I would say they're the favorite. Maybe Ohio State, but I would probably say Michigan's a favorite, just based off of what they brought back in my
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah. So obviously an Ohio State fan, right? But I'm going to try to be as subjective as possible. Listen, Michigan has beat us up 2 years in a row. They beat us in the trenches, and they are at least stacked to do the same, right? Stephen mentioned 8 of 11 starters coming back. They are missing Ronnie Bell, their number one receiver from last year. But this was not a super thrown team. Like Steven mentioned, two amazing running backs coming back in Corum and Edwards. Both of them at dang near 1,000 yards. Obviously, Corum, 1,400 plus. Edwards missed 1,000 yards by 9 yards. That's what they do. They are going to dig in the trenches, and they're going to beat you up front. JJ is not asked to do a crazy amount, just like Steven said. He threw for under 3,000 yards last year, only 22 touchdowns. And if you remember the Ohio State game, that's really kind of what we put him at task to do. So what he did show is he is capable. He is capable of, and this was a 5-star recruit, if you don't remember. He is capable of beating you with his arm if he has to. But what Michigan is going to do is they're going to beat you up in the trenches. This is a good team. I make no qualms about it. We are playing, Ohio State is playing them in the big house. It is concerning. It is concerning the way we've played them the last 2 years and what they bring back. Like Steven said, this is a very veteran-laden team. They are bringing back a number of offensive linemen, and that offensive line has won the top offensive line award 2 years in a row, and I suspect they're going to win it again this year. So barring injuries, I have this Michigan team doing very well. Now, my concern for them is simple. It's simply that I don't think, especially losing Ronnie Bell, I don't think they have a great receiver. We know Roman Wilson, the Blazer out of Hawaii, right? He's from Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
Out of Hawaii. But he did not have great numbers. So what they were able to overcome teams stacking a box last year. But when we're talking about the receivers that they have back, you're talking about a receiver that had every receiver they have back had less than 500 yards. Johnson barely missed this. Cornelius Johnson had 499. That's their top returning receiver. So can you stack the box and make one of these receivers beat you in one-on-one coverage. Again, they were able to do it with Ronnie Bell last year. But what does Cornelius Johnson, what does Roman Wilson have when they're asked to do it? If they can do that, if they can win in the passing game a little bit, again to a point of maybe 3,000 yards, or at least make you have to respect their ability to pass and not stack the box with 8-9 people. This is a team that has the ability. I'm not giving them this, but has the ability to be in that national championship conversation. I believe they're going to start the season ranked number 2, deservedly. I believe that up until at least the Ohio State game, and we'll talk about their schedule here in a minute, it's going to be a steamroll. They're going to roll teams up. I think the only concern on their schedule is the Penn State game. And if you remember how they beat Penn State up in that second half, it's going to be much of the same. They're going to be able to beat Penn State in the trenches. And it comes down to that Ohio State game. And like I said, when I talked about Ohio State, I think that regardless of how that game turns out, and what I see is a lack of talent around college football altogether, I suspect that both teams are going to make it in the Final Four again this year. So you want to bring up their schedule?
Yeah, well, so just to kind of disagree with you there. So I think when it comes to Ohio State, I think we talked about them previous, obviously, but their schedule is tailor-made for them to lose to Michigan and still get in, because
Right.
that means they would still have beaten Penn State and Notre Dame, which I'm assuming are going to be top 15-ish teams towards the end of the year.
Agree.
You can't say the same for Michigan. They're playing ECU, UNLV, and Bowling Green. I think if they go 11-0 and lose to Ohio State, I don't think they get in. And that's what I have in my notes. I think that is probably what's going to happen. They're either going to need to go perfect 12-0 and breeze through whoever they play in the Big Ten championship game to get in, or what they're going to need is for Ohio State to either lose to Notre Dame and something like that being shaken up. Because I don't anticipate Michigan being able to go 11-1 with a loss to Ohio State, and their next best win is Penn State, and we don't know how good Penn State's going to be, and the rest of these teams are going to be terrible. So, right. I mean, when you look at like the strength of record and all that stuff, they're not going to be anywhere near there unless they beat Penn State and Ohio State. So I don't see a world. I mean, even if we say Clemson and Florida State both lose a game, I still think, let's say Clemson hypothetically lost to Florida State. I still think Clemson's resume is better than Michigan's.
With a Notre Dame win.
Exactly. And that's why I think Michigan would have to be damn near perfect to get in, unless they were to lose early and then beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten. Then
that's a valid point. I mean, because you look at the schedule, as you guys see it now on the screen, it is now Ohio State schedule looks much the same, but obviously, like Steven said, we do have the Notre Dame game. Yeah, you're talking about two games where I think Michigan is going to have any level of concern. The Penn State game, the Ohio State game. Obviously, Michigan State is a rival, and that game has been closer than people thought going in many years. And they are at Michigan State. They're playing at East Lansing this year. But the rest of that, no diss to any of these teams. But when you're out of conference, it's East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green. You should roll over those teams.
And they're all home games.
I'm actually shocked, really, that Michigan does not have even a middle of the road kind of out of conference game, even a Texas Tech or somebody that we would kind of consider middle of the road. They really kind of took very.
Let's be realistic though. When was the last time Michigan played someone out of conference? Like I can't. We can just kind of go back and see. I don't know who they played last year.
Who is? Let's see who they're.
Like, come on, bro. Like Colorado State, Hawaii, and
I mean, this was, and I think this was part of your argument against them, and I think this is part of the argument against them. I think now Michigan trying to so I think there were you remember schedules get made years in advance, right? Yeah. And I think when these schedules were made, Michigan was not. You remember they had some down years. Michigan just became back in that national championship picture really in the last 2 years. So I think they were trying to get wins. They were not trying to pad a resume.
Yeah, to me, it's like I don't know. It's kind of a joke. Like I said, in my eyes, like I think based on the schedule and based on what they brought back, it's hard to bet against them because you really only have to worry about the two games. And I don't even think Penn State is a team to worry about in my eyes. We'll talk about them next, but I think Ohio State is the only team that you really have to say like, okay, we got to suit up and win that game. Because I mean, even last year when like we were in like week 3 or 4, like everybody's already looking forward to that game. Like it's like they were talking about it in like week 5, like they didn't have to go play Nebraska or Michigan State or any of these other teams. I think it's gonna be the same thing this year.
The only thing that I think is going to help Michigan is I think they're going to roll up some of these teams. And I think you're going to see some really bad scores. And that's going to put Michigan kind of in the limelight. And let's kind of couple that with, and we talked about Georgia in the previous video. I suspect that Michigan's going to come in number 2. If Georgia was to drop a game, that means Michigan is probably going to take that number 1 seed and hold it for most of the year.
Yeah.
Because they're going to put up some ridiculous numbers. And they're going to have some very lopsided scores when you kind of look at the schedule. And they're going to go into that Ohio State game, possibly. And again, we're assuming a lot here. But the way I kind of see the season playing out, they're probably going to have been the number 1 seed for a very long time. So what happens if they do drop the Ohio State game, especially if the game is close, if it is a 1-possession game or, having been the number 1, I don't see them dropping. And again, there are 50 million factors that are gonna kind of tell that story. What is every other team doing, right? But we've seen TCU this year drop a game and not move at all. So is it possible that the team that's been number 1 7-8 weeks only drops to number 4? It's like I said, we'd have to know what the rest of the field is doing and the way the rest of it shakes out. But I think it's possible.
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible. I mean, we saw it this year. But I also feel like this year was kind of an anomaly just because I think the AC kind of worked its way like out of the playoff. And then you had the Pac-12 kind of work its way out of the playoffs. So I feel like the last spot was kind of just like, okay, here it is. Like it was just kind of handed to a team based off of the fact that 2 conferences didn't really have a standing winner that was a head and shoulders above everybody else. I think that's the reason why. But just to kind of stay on Michigan and not steer too far off. My last note I had on them was I do think they're the most experienced and veteran team, but that obviously I know this is a 2023 preview video, but that's going to obviously put them in the same situation as Georgia's in this year. Now, the only kind of difference I would say is Michigan has recruited really, really well. And I would say with Michigan, I expect them, I would say coming into this season, I didn't take them serious. Like even last year, like you guys remember the videos, like when we made the videos, I wasn't taking them serious. Right. I would say from here on out, like I'm going to take them serious. Like I think
they're deserving.
I think Michigan is going to be a team. You're talking about top 3 to 5 team favored to win the championship, probably for the next 3 to 5 seasons, unless they were to lose a coach or something crazy happens. But that would be my outlook on not only this year as a championship contender, but even the next coming years with how they're recruiting. And I think they're just going to retool. It's going to be one of those situations. They're not going to fall off a cliff like other teams might.
No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think Michigan's here to stay. They are a tough team. I think as long as Harbaugh's there, they're going to stick with this. They're going to get guys in the trenches, both offensively and defensively. They just play hard-nosed football. I think they're here for a while. I think Michigan is, and I hate to say it, but Michigan is back. Michigan is back to being. This is again the team that, in terms of wins all time, I think they're still number 1 in wins all time. This is a blue blood team that had about a decade where they were down. But I think Michigan is back, and I think they found a style that works for them. Now the question becomes, are they still this when they don't have Blake Corum and they don't have Donovan Edwards? We'll see. But yeah, I think Michigan's back.